It is in offices, in hospitals, in restaurants, in bedrooms, in windowless bathrooms, in dark kitchens, in bright living rooms. It is in the homes of people who love plants, and in the homes of people who have never watered anything in their lives. It survives neglect, drought, excess water, lack of light, and dust accumulated for months. It is probably the most resilient plant on the planet. And yet, it holds a secret that the vast majority of people who have it in their homes are completely unaware of. The mother-in-law's tongue, the sansevieria, the sword of St. George. It has as many names as there are countries where it is grown, and it is grown in practically every country. It is estimated to be one of the 5 most sold indoor plants in the world. Millions of households have it. Millions of people walk past it every day without paying the slightest attention. And that is understandable, because the mother-in-law's tongue asks for nothing. It does not complain. It does not wilt at the first oversight. It does not demand attention or special care. It is the plant that is there in its corner, in silence, without bothering anyone. But every now and then, something extraordinary happens. Something that most of its owners have never witnessed. Something so rare and so unexpected that when it occurs, people don't know what to do, what to think, or what it means. The mother-in-law's tongue blooms. And when that happens, what it is communicating is something that deserves to be listened to very carefully. In more than 20 years of growing all kinds of plants, I have seen the mother-in-law's tongue bloom exactly 4 times. 4 times in 2 decades. And on each of those occasions, what was happening around that plant, in that home, in the lives of the people who lived there, had something in common. Something that cannot be explained by botany alone. Something that the oldest traditions in the world have been pointing out for centuries, and that most modern people have forgotten. The plant that withstands everything has a limit. To understand what the blooming of the mother-in-law's tongue means, we first need to understand something fundamental about this plant. The sansevieria evolved in the dry tropical regions of West Africa, in an environment where rain is unpredictable, where the sun is relentless, and where the soils are poor. This plant developed a capacity for survival that borders on the supernatural. It stores water in its thick, fleshy leaves. It performs a special type of photosynthesis called crassulacean acid metabolism, which allows it to open its pores only at night to reduce water loss. It can survive for months without a single drop of water. It is literally a survival machine. But there is something that few people know about extremely resilient plants. The tougher a plant is under normal conditions, the more significant its blooming becomes. Because plants do not bloom on a whim. Blooming is a process that consumes an enormous amount of energy and resources, producing flowers, generating nectar, developing the reproductive structures. All of that requires the plant to divert resources that it would normally dedicate to its own survival. A plant only invests in blooming when it has a powerful reason to do so. And in the case of the mother-in-law's tongue, that reason is almost always the same: stress. Not the stress of abandonment or poor care, but a deeper, more subtle type of stress that botanists know about, but is rarely explained outside academic circles. The mother-in-law's tongue blooms when it perceives that its long-term survival is threatened, when something in its environment indicates that conditions could change drastically, when its instinct, honed by millions of years of evolution, tells it that it is time to reproduce before it is too late. It is an act of biological urgency. The plant that withstands everything, that survives everything, that never complains about anything, suddenly feels that it needs to leave offspring. It needs to ensure that its genetic code survives even if it does not. And the only way to do that is to bloom. What traditions say when it blooms? Now, what botany explains as a response to stress, popular traditions interpret in much richer and more nuanced ways. And what is interesting is that many of those interpretations, even though they do not use scientific language, coincide surprisingly with biological reality. In Brazil, where the plant is known as the Sword of St. George, blooming is considered a message of extreme spiritual protection. The belief says that when the Sword of St. George blooms, the plant has been absorbing such a large amount of negative energy from the environment that it needs to release that load through its flowers. The flowers are the escape valve, the way the plant has of releasing everything it has accumulated to protect the home. According to this tradition, blooming is at the same time a warning sign and a sign that the protection has worked. The plant fought against something serious, and the flowers are the proof of that battle. In Nigeria, where the Sansevieria is native, certain communities consider the blooming of this plant to be an omen of important changes, not necessarily good or bad, simply big changes. Changes that will alter the lives of the people who live with the plant, a birth, a death, a journey with no return, a profound transformation. The plant, according to this view, does not predict the future, but rather detects the energy of change before it materializes. In Mexico, popular tradition associates the blooming of the mother-in-law's tongue with the presence of protective spirits in the home. When the plant blooms, they say, it is because the ancestors are near. They are visiting, caring, watching. The flowers are the visible manifestation of that invisible presence. That is why, in many Mexican homes, when the mother-in-law's tongue blooms, a candle is lit and thanks are given to the ancestors for their protection. In India, where Sansevieria is frequently used in Vastu Shastra practices, the Hindu equivalent of Feng Shui, blooming is interpreted as a sign that the energy of the home has reached a critical point of transformation. The home is about to change energetic phase. It may be an elevation, an ascent, a leap to the next level, or it may be a purge, a deep cleaning, a necessary shakeup. In any case, the blooming warns that nothing is going to stay the same. What is fascinating is that all these traditions, separated by continents and centuries, agree on three fundamental points. First, the blooming of the mother-in-law's tongue is not normal. It is an exceptional event that deserves attention. Second, the blooming is related to the energy of the environment, not just the physical conditions of the plant. And third, the blooming always signals a moment of change, of transformation, of something that is moving in the lives of the people who inhabit that home. The flowers almost no one has seen. The flowers of the mother-in-law's tongue are so rare that many people who have had this plant for decades do not know what they look like. And when they appear, the surprise is double, because they look nothing like what one would expect from such an austere and minimalist plant. From the center of the rosette of leaves emerges a long, slender stalk, sometimes more than half a meter tall, covered with small white or greenish buds that cluster together in racemes. When those buds open, they reveal tiny tubular flowers with fine, elongated petals that curve backward like little stars. And then comes the most unexpected part of all, the aroma, the mother-in-law's tongue, a plant that for years has not emitted even the slightest smell, suddenly fills the room with an intense, sweet, almost intoxicating fragrance. An aroma that intensifies at night, because Sansevieria flowers are nocturnal. They open at sunset and release their perfume during the hours of darkness, attracting nocturnal pollinators that in their natural habitat would be moths and bats. That nocturnal aromatic explosion has an extraordinary effect on the home. The plant that had never given any signs of life beyond its rigid leaves suddenly transforms the atmosphere of the room with a perfume that no one expected. It is as if the plant had stored all that fragrance for years, accumulating it, concentrating it, waiting for the exact moment to release it all at once. From a scientific point of view, the aroma of Sansevieria flowers contains compounds such as linalool, benzaldehyde, and various esters that have relaxing effects on the nervous system. It is an aroma that induces calm, facilitates deep sleep, and reduces anxiety levels. The plant that purifies the air during the day releases therapeutic aromas at night. It is a complete wellness system that only activates under exceptional circumstances. The flowers last between 1 and 3 weeks, depending on the conditions. During that time, the same aromatic release occurs every night, and every morning, a transparent, sticky liquid similar to nectar appears at the base of the flowers. That nectar is so abundant that it sometimes drips onto the leaves and the floor, leaving shiny spots that can be mistaken for damage or disease in the plant. But it is not. It is pure abundance. It is the plant giving everything it has in a gesture that it may not repeat for many years, or perhaps never again. What to do when your mother-in-law's tongue blooms? If someone is fortunate enough to witness this event, there are some things that traditions and experience recommend doing, and others that they recommend avoiding. The first is not to cut the flower stalk. The temptation to cut the flowers to put them in a vase is understandable, but doing so interrupts the process that the plant has initiated. The flowers need to complete their full cycle on the plant. To bloom, release their aroma, produce nectar, and eventually wither naturally. Only when the flowers have completely dried should the stalk be cut, as close to the base as possible. The second is to pay attention to what is happening in your personal life. Traditions agree that blooming is a sign of change, not a prediction of something specific, but an indication that energies are in motion. It is a good time to reflect on what is changing, what needs to change, and what decisions have been postponed. The plant does not give concrete instructions, but it does give notice that the moment to act is near. The third is to give thanks. It sounds simple, perhaps too simple, but the wisest traditions in the world agree that gratitude is the correct response to any sign from nature. Thank the plant for its silent protection during all the years it did not bloom. Thank it for the signal it is giving now. Thank it for the unexpected beauty of flowers that no one expected to see. The fourth is to observe what happens afterward. In the weeks and months following the bloom, pay attention to the changes that appear, new opportunities, people who arrive or who leave, situations that get resolved or that become complicated, not with paranoia or anxiety, but with curiosity, with the attitude of someone who has received a warning and is simply paying attention to what comes next. And the fifth is to care for the plant after blooming with a little more attention than usual. After flowering, the mother-in-law's tongue has spent an enormous amount of energy. It needs to recover. A little more watering during the following weeks. Some mild fertilizer, good indirect light. There is no need to overdo it, but it is important to recognize that the plant has made an extraordinary effort and deserves extraordinary care in return. Why this plant is more important than it seems. There is something deeply revealing about the mother-in-law's tongue that goes beyond its blooming. It is a plant that NASA included in its famous study of air-purifying plants. Sansevieria is one of the few plants that removes formaldehyde, benzene, xylene, and trichloroethylene from indoor air, and it does so 24 hours a day, including at night, when most plants stop producing oxygen. That means the plant that sits in the forgotten corner of the house, the one no one waters, the one no one looks at, the one no one thanks, is working silently to purify the air that all the inhabitants of the home breathe, every hour, every day, every year, asking for nothing in return. When that plant, after years of silent service, produces flowers for the first time, it is not an accident. It is not a botanical whim. It is the culmination of a long and deep process that has both biological and energetic roots. It is the quietest plant in the house, speaking for the first, and perhaps the last, time. And what it says deserves to be heard. The mother-in-law's tongue does not bloom to decorate the room. It does not bloom to impress anyone. It blooms because something has moved it to do so. Something that comes from the environment, from the energy of the home, from the invisible currents that circulate between people and the spaces they inhabit. And when a plant that has proven it can survive anything decides it is time to bloom, the question is not whether the message is real. The question is whether we are willing to receive it. The next time someone walks past their mother-in-law's tongue without looking at it, it might be worth stopping for a second, observing its leaves, looking at the base for any new sprout, any stalk that wasn't there yesterday, any sign that something is about to happen. Because when that plant decides to speak, it will do so only once, and whoever is not paying attention will miss one of the most powerful messages that the plant world can offer.